"This smells old," my granddaughter said, her nose scrunched, holding the silk scarf I had wrapped with trembling care the night before. The room burst into laughter. My daughter, her husband, even my other grandchildren. No one looked at me. They just kept laughing. I smiled, or at least I tried. "Grandma always gives these vintage things." Olivia chuckled, as if I wasn't sitting right there. I had spent 3 days choosing that scarf. It was real silk, from a tiny boutique I used to love when I could still walk without pain. It reminded me of the scarves I wore in my 20s when life felt full of beauty and I felt full of value. But now I was just Grandma, the one with old gifts, old stories, old smells. Later that night, as I lay in the guest room, the cold one, the one by the garage, I stared at the ceiling and realized something I had ignored for years. I wasn't family. I was an accessory, a nostalgic relic everyone liked to take out on holidays and quietly tuck away again. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just got up the next morning, made a pot of coffee, and while everyone else slept off their wine and laughter, I logged into my online banking. I canceled every standing transfer. No more monthly payments toward my daughter's mortgage. No more private school tuition for Olivia. No more paying for the family's cell phone plan, or the surprise medical bills, or the car insurance on that SUV I wasn't allowed to ride in because it's too cramped, Mom. I was done. I didn't say anything when I left. I smiled, hugged everyone goodbye. Let them believe I was the same harmless old woman who had handed over her life one wire transfer at a time. They'd figure it out soon enough. The call started 3 days later, first from my daughter. "Mom, did your bank block the payment? The mortgage didn't go through? Blocked?" "No, honey. I just stopped being your silent investor." I didn't answer. I let it ring. Then came the texts. More calls. Then Olivia messaged me herself, asking why her school had emailed about a missed payment. I watched the panic build, quietly, calmly. It was strange how peaceful it felt to no longer carry their lives on my back. They had laughed at me, not with me, at me. And yet I had been paying their bills, keeping their lives afloat. All because I thought that's what love was, what family meant: sacrifice, support, loyalty. But loyalty, I've learned, doesn't mean servitude, and sacrifice isn't love when no one even sees you bleeding. 1 week passed. Then, a knock at my door. It was my daughter, hair pulled back, face tired. She stepped into my tiny, cozy apartment like she was entering a stranger's home. "Why did you do this, Mom?" Her voice wasn't angry, just confused, offended, like I had broken a contract we never signed. I poured her tea and sat down slowly. She didn't drink it. "You didn't think I'd notice?" she asked, brows raised. "I knew you would," I said quietly. "Eventually." She looked around the room. No grand piano, no crystal vases, just simple wooden shelves, old books, a crocheted blanket I made last winter. "How are you living like this?" I smiled. "Peacefully." "But you were helping us, all of us. Why stop now?" I looked her in the eyes and asked, "When's the last time you helped me?" She didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. I didn't blame her. Not entirely. I had allowed it. I said yes every time they needed help. I made excuses. "They're still young. It's just this once. Family sticks together." But the thing is, family had become a one-way street, and I had walked it until my feet bled. Now I was resting, and they were finally walking for themselves. After my daughter left that morning, I sat at the kitchen table long after the tea went cold. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of memories, of noise that used to fill my life, of small moments I had overlooked for years just to keep the peace. It wasn't the first time I had been made to feel small in that family. It was just the first time I decided not to accept it anymore. They never yelled at me, never hit me, never told me I wasn't welcome. No, they did worse. They smiled while they erased me. It started slowly, after my husband died. Just move. In with us for a while, Mom. It'll be easier for all of us. At first, it was. I felt useful. I helped with the kids, did the laundry, cooked dinner. They thanked me. At the beginning. But gratitude fades quickly when help becomes expected. Soon, I was the default babysitter, the grocery runner, the one who paid when the fridge broke down, when the backyard needed repairs, when they forgot to buy winter coats for the kids. I said yes, over and over again. Because that's what mothers do, right? They give. And give. And when their hands are empty, they find a way to give more. I took early retirement to move in with them, sold the family home, handed my daughter a large portion of what I made so she could pay off her credit card debt. Just to help you breathe, I had said. She cried then, said I saved her life. She stopped saying thank you a year later. I remembered the day they added me to their family budget spreadsheet. It wasn't a discussion. It was an email. Hey, Mom, just to keep things organized, I've added your monthly contribution here. There it was, a line item. Mom, $1,300, household support. Right above Netflix and just below pest control. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the screen for a long time. It felt like something broke quietly inside me that day. But I couldn't name what it was. When my son-in-law lost his job, I paid the bills without question. When the kids needed braces, I covered the deposit. When my daughter's car broke down, I co-signed the loan for a new one, and then found out months later that the payments were being taken from my account automatically. Each time I reminded myself, it's for the family. But one day, while folding laundry, I overheard Olivia telling her friend on the phone, "Oh, my grandma, she doesn't really do anything. She just hangs around the house." You know how old people are. I stood there, holding a damp towel, like I had just been slapped across the face. My legs suddenly felt heavy. My chest felt hollow. I didn't say anything then either. What would I have said? Actually, I pay for this house. I feed you. I make sure the lights stay on and your dentist appointments are paid for. No one would have believed me. Or worse, they would have said, "Well, no one asked you to." And that's what hurt the most. They acted like they were doing me a favor by letting me help. When I finally moved out, it wasn't dramatic. Just quiet. I told them I needed space, that I wanted to downsize and live in a place with less noise. They nodded, distracted, already thinking about how they'd cover the mortgage now that my name was no longer attached. "Will you still help? With Olivia's tuition?" my daughter asked as I loaded the last of my things into the cab. I lied. I said I'd think about it. But I already knew. After I canceled the payments, the real faces started to show. At first, it was confusion, then urgency, then guilt-tripping. "Mom, we just want to know what's going on. You've always helped. Why stop now? Why?" Because I was tired. Tired of being remembered only when the credit card declined. Tired of being laughed at when I gave something that came from the heart instead of a gift receipt. Tired of watching my sacrifices be taken as expectation. And maybe, most of all, tired of the silence that followed every time I needed help. and didn't dare ask. The turning point came a few weeks later. I received a forwarded email from the school finance office. Olivia's tuition hadn't been paid. The message read, "Per our records, the designated guardian, Mrs. Dorothy Reynolds, is no longer listed as the payer on file. Please update billing information immediately." Attached was a note from my daughter. "Please fix this. We're not in a position to cover this right now. I told them you'd handle it." No greeting, no, "Are you okay?" Just an order, like always. I didn't reply, and that silence was louder than any speech I could have made. They showed up at my apartment the next day. Both of them, my daughter and son-in-law. They didn't come in, just stood at the doorway, looking uncomfortable, like two kids caught doing something wrong. "You could have told us," my daughter said. "I didn't think you needed to be told," I replied. They looked at each other. My son-in-law scratched the back of his neck. "You're punishing us," he said, not accusing, just confused. "No," I said gently. "I'm releasing myself." There was a long silence. Then my daughter finally said it. "We didn't realize how much you were giving." And there it was, the confession. Not out of gratitude, but out of shock. They hadn't known, because they'd never asked, never noticed, because I had made it too easy for them not to. That night I sat with my old checkbooks, looked over old statements. I found receipts going back 10 years. 10 years of tuition, groceries, flights, clothing, medical bills, hundreds of thousands of dollars, quietly spent. And I had thought love would make it worth it. It hadn't. Now I have enough to live on, modestly but peacefully. I wake up when I want. I water my own plants. I take walks without asking anyone's permission. No one relies on me anymore. And maybe, for the first time, I can start relying on myself. The morning after they stood on my doorstep, confused, silent, waiting for me to fold, I woke up to a voicemail from my daughter. "Mom, listen. I'm sorry. I know we haven't always expressed things the right way. It's just, you've always been there, you know? We never imagined you wouldn't be." That was the problem. They never imagined I wouldn't be. They never stopped to ask what it cost me to always be there. Always be there. She didn't cry. She didn't blame. She just sat with me and ate. And then, after a long silence, she reached into her purse and handed me a single sheet of paper. It was a form, a family payment plan she had printed almost 10 years ago. One, she used to organize contributions from me to cover their monthly bills. It had a column labeled, "Dorothy Auto Transfer, confirmed." I stared at it, then at her. She looked me in the eye and said, "I shredded every copy but this one. I wanted you to be the one to destroy the last piece." I didn't say anything. I just stood up, walked to the kitchen drawer, took out the old pair of scissors I used to cut coupons, and sliced the paper in half, and then in half again, and again, until all that was left were scraps. She watched every movement, then stood, picked up the pieces, and dropped them in the trash herself. That was the closest we ever came to real healing. No big speech, no music swelling in the background, just two women sitting at a table, one who had given too much, and one who had taken too long to understand the cost. A few months later, I received a letter from a small non-profit where I had once volunteered, long before the years of quiet servitude. They were building a new branch, a community garden for elderly women living alone. They wanted to name a bench after me. I laughed when I read it. "A bench," I said out loud. But then I saw the name they wanted to inscribe. "In honor of Dorothy Reynolds. She gave what she had, until she learned what she was worth. I didn't cry. I just folded the letter, slid it into the drawer next to the scarf, and felt the kind of stillness you only earn after being misunderstood for a lifetime. The bench was built. I visited it once, sat on it with a sandwich and a thermos of tea. Nobody knew who I was, and that was fine. I knew. They still call me sometimes, not often, but enough. Sometimes it's Olivia, telling me about a class she's taking. Sometimes it's my daughter, asking how I am. Not asking for help, just asking. I don't expect consistency. I don't need it anymore, because I no longer count love in calls or flowers or gifts. I count it in how light I feel when I hang up the phone. Took my name off the list of payers that morning after Christmas. But I didn't realize then what I was really removing myself from. It wasn't just the bank drafts and monthly obligations. It was the unspoken contract that said your value is measured by how quietly you serve. I tore it up, and no one has dared try to write me a new one. I'm not bitter. I'm just free. There's a difference. And if you're wondering what happened to the scarf, it now hangs in a shadow box on my wall, beside the painting I made of it. A reminder of what I used to give away too easily. History. Care. Meaning. Now I keep it for myself. Not because no one else deserves it, but because I do, and I no longer need anyone else to say it. I know it's true. I had only bought time. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Olivia. I almost didn't answer. But something in me, the old part, the soft part, still hoped. Grandma? Her voice was careful. Yes? Silence. I didn't mean to make you feel bad. At Christmas, with the scarf. Closed my eyes. That scarf. That damn scarf. That wasn't just a gift, I said softly. It belonged to my mother. It was the last thing she wore before she passed. She didn't respond. It still smelled like her perfume. I added. I wrapped it carefully, hoping you'd feel her spirit in it. A long pause. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't cry. I just nodded, knowing she couldn't see me. I didn't know, she added. No, I said gently. You didn't want to. She didn't ask for money that day. She didn't mention school. She just said, "Can I visit you sometime?" And for the first time, I said yes. She came on a Sunday. No one else. Just her. She sat at my table, looked around my small apartment, and asked me about the paintings on the wall, the books on my shelf. She even asked if I still had the scarf. I brought it out from the drawer and handed it to her. She held it differently, this time. Gently. Do you think she'd be proud of you? She asked, tracing the edge of the fabric. I smiled. I think she'd be proud of me for stopping. Stopping what? Trying to buy love. That visit didn't fix our history. It didn't undo the years of taking and silence and passive, insults dressed as jokes. But it was real, and for once it didn't come with a request. 2 weeks passed. Then a letter came in the mail from my daughter. Not a bill, not an invoice. A letter. She said she'd started looking for part-time work, that Olivia had decided to apply for scholarships, that she was learning how much I had carried, and how blindly she had let me. She ended the letter with a sentence I never thought I'd hear from her. If you never help us again, I'll still be grateful for everything you already gave. I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer as the scarf. It felt like closure. Not the fairy tale kind, but the honest kind, the earned kind. There would still be distance, but it was a distance I could live with, because now, at least, it was honest. No more invisible contracts, No more silent expectations. Just a woman in her late 60s, learning how to live without proving she was worth something through the size of her generosity. I looked around my home. It was modest, quiet, no granite countertops, no stainless steel appliances. But everything here was mine, chosen, earned, and no one had laughed at me in months. That silence, that was mine too. I didn't tell anyone, but the day I got that letter from my daughter, I sat with it in my lap for almost 2 hours before opening it. I kept running my fingers over the edge of the envelope, wondering if it was going to ask for something. I even rehearsed my answer. No, just in case. But when I read it and found no demands, only words, I didn't feel victory. I felt grief. Because sometimes an apology arrives so late, you've already buried the version of yourself that needed it. Still, I kept the letter, folded, in the drawer, beside the scarf, beside the receipts I had stopped collecting, and in that same drawer, I slipped a note I wrote that night. I am no longer applying for love in a house that only opens its doors when it's in debt. A few days later, Olivia called again. This time, she asked if I could come watch her debate competition. I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to go. Not out of spite, but out of caution. I had grown allergic to hope when it came to that family. But then she said, "It would mean a lot to me. No one else is coming." So I said yes, not because I wanted to rescue anyone, but because I remembered how it felt to sit in an auditorium and look for a familiar face and find no one. The high school was smaller than I expected. The chairs in the gym were hard plastic, and the microphone cracked every time someone spoke. But when Olivia walked up to the podium and saw me, something shifted in her face. The tension in her shoulders softened. She waved. Not a showy wave, not one to impress, but a small one, personal, real. Her speech wasn't perfect. She stumbled once, but she stood tall. She spoke with conviction. And when she finished, the small applause filled the room. Later, when we met outside, she hugged me. And this time, it didn't feel like manipulation. It felt like a granddaughter trying to reconnect, not ask, not take, just be. As we walked to the parking lot, she said, "I didn't think you'd come." I looked at her. "Because I used to only show up with my wallet?" She looked down at her shoes. "Yeah." Then she added, "But this was better." That stayed with me for days. I hadn't realized how much of my identity had been built around being the one who fixes everything. The one who arrives with a check, a casserole, a solution. And now that I had nothing left to offer except my time and presence, I was finally being seen. Isn't it strange? When you stop being useful, the right people will either walk away or finally show up. One morning, I was on the phone with Louise, my friend from the painting group. She told me she was helping plan a senior art exhibit at the community center. "Would you consider putting one of your watercolors in?" she asked. I laughed. "Louise, they're barely watercolors. More like colorful accidents." She didn't laugh. She said, "Put one in. Not because it's perfect, because it's yours." That sentence hit me like a freight train. So much of my life had been spent giving away what I had. Money, time, energy. But I had rarely offered what was mine, my voice, my expression, my story. I picked a piece, a small one, sloppy edges, muted, colors. It was a painting of a scarf on a chair. The scarf. No one knew the meaning but me. But when I saw it hanging on the wall that day, with a tiny white card that read, "Dorothy R., something inside me stood taller. I wasn't invisible. Not anymore. A week later, I got another envelope in the mail. This one from a lawyer's office. At first, I panicked. My heart thudded in my chest. Had something happened? Had they tried to sue me over something again? But when I opened it, I froze. Inside was a revised copy of my daughter's will. It clearly stated, "All gifts and assets received from Dorothy Reynolds during my lifetime are to be considered freely given. She owes us nothing. She has already given more than we deserved." And below that, one more line. "If she ever needs help, it is her name that will be first on our list." I sat there stunned, not because I expected her to leave me anything, but because, for the first time, she had made it official. I didn't owe anyone anything, not a penny, not another piece of my life. She had freed me. I cried for a long time, not because I was sad, but because I had been waiting for that sentence my whole life, without even knowing it. After that, I visited less, not out of bitterness, but because I no longer felt summoned. I would come when I wanted to. I would say yes when I chose to. And the rest of the time, I would live, because the years I had left were mine, and I had no plans to spend them proving my worth. Olivia came to visit one Saturday afternoon. She brought a cake she had baked herself. "It's a little burnt," she said, placing it on the table. "But I made it without asking Mom for help." We laughed. We ate it anyway. She asked if I still painted. I showed her the scarf picture. She stared at it for a long time. "You kept it?" she asked. "I painted it," I corrected. She looked up at me and said, "I didn't understand back then." "I know," I said. "You weren't supposed to. You were a child." She paused. "And now?" I smiled. "Now you're learning." That evening, after she left, I sat by the window and watched the light fall over the rooftops. It was quiet, not lonely, just quiet. And I realized something. I didn't need a grand apology. I didn't need them to rewrite the past. I just needed to stop rewriting myself into a version they'd accept. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel used. I felt seen. And being seen, for who I truly was, with nothing to offer but presence, was more powerful than every check I had ever written. It had been almost a year since that Christmas, the one where I wrapped a silk scarf, with shaking hands and handed it over like a piece of my history, only to hear my granddaughter laugh and say, "This smells old." It had been even longer since the last time I paid their mortgage, covered their tuition, or transferred money just to keep the peace. And yet, I had never felt richer, not in money, but in clarity, in space, in stillness, in knowing that every step I took now belonged to me. I had stopped trying to make them see me as irreplaceable, and that was the moment I finally became unforgettable. They had learned to live without my money, and I had learned to live without their permission. That spring, Olivia graduated from high school. She didn't go to the private school. She stayed in public school, earned a scholarship, and sent me an envelope with her graduation photo inside. On the back, in her handwriting, it read, "For the woman who taught me that love isn't what you receive, it's what you choose to give." And when to stop, I framed it, not because it was sentimental, but because it was the first thing she'd ever given me, without being asked. On Mother's Day, I didn't expect anything. I was used to the silence. But that morning there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my daughter, standing with a bag of groceries, a bouquet of cheap tulips, and a folding chair. "I brought lunch," she said. "I didn't want to come empty-handed." I nodded and let her in. She didn't ask for anything. I deleted the message without replying. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. because I was finally starting to understand the difference between being loved and being needed. And they didn't love me. They needed me. Or rather, they needed what I could give them. Money, time, labor, silence. But I was done giving what I never got in return. The following week, things escalated. My granddaughter, Olivia, messaged me directly, not to apologize, not to ask how I was, but to accuse. I just think it's messed up that you'd turn your back on us like this. I'm the one getting punished, and I didn't even do anything. If you didn't want to help, you should have said no from the start instead of pretending to care. I stared at her words for a long time. Pretending to care. Had I been pretending when I stayed up all night sewing her dance costume the week before her recital? Was I pretending when I skipped my own doctor's appointment to take her to an interview she wasn't prepared for? Was I pretending the Christmas I gave her an iPad under my daughter's name so she wouldn't feel less than in front of her cousins? If this was how she viewed me, maybe I had failed in loving a family who only saw me as utility. I didn't respond. But I did write a long letter to myself in my notebook. I titled it, Things They'll Never Know. I filled the pages with all the invisible acts I had done for them. The bills paid without mention. The birthdays remembered when they forgot mine. The meals made when no one said thank you. And at the bottom, I wrote in bold letters, Never again. 2 days later, my sister called from Florida. I heard you're having issues with your daughter. What's going on, Dot? I hadn't told her a thing, but clearly, the family phone tree had been activated. She said you just stopped helping, no warning, no explanation. I sat in silence for a moment, then said, Would you keep handing out money and care to people who laugh at your presence and ignore your absence? She was quiet. You've always been generous, she said eventually. That's who you are. That's who I was, I corrected. The next time I checked my email, I saw a forwarded message from the school's financial office again. This time addressed directly to me. The subject line read, Immediate attention required. Olivia Reynolds' enrollment at risk. And below it, Tuition for spring semester remains unpaid. Please remit balance or contact administration to discuss withdrawal options. Underneath was a single line, written by my daughter before she sent it. I hope you're proud of what you've, done. That line hung in my chest for hours. I wasn't proud, not in the way she meant. But I was free, and that was something. They didn't understand that this wasn't revenge. I wasn't trying to hurt them. I was simply finished, done pretending. My sacrifices were mutual, done acting like my exhaustion was just part of being a good mother. There's nothing noble about burning yourself down just to keep others warm. Weeks passed. Spring turned into early summer. I started reading again. The kind of books I used to love before life got too crowded with everyone else's emergencies. Bought a used bike. Nothing fancy. But it got me to the park and back. I joined a watercolor group at the community center. I hadn't painted since 1983. I was awful at it, but it made me laugh again. And for the first time in years, I found myself surrounded by people who didn't need anything from me. They just liked me. Me. I met a woman named Louise, a widow like me, retired nurse. She had the kind of bluntness I adored and the kind of freedom I envied. You know, she told me one afternoon while we painted side by side. People confuse love with obligation all the time, especially women our age. I didn't respond. I just let her words soak in. She smiled at me, then added, You're not cruel, Dorothy. You're healing. And for the first time in years, I believed someone. Of course, peace never lasts forever. My daughter showed up again, this time with a different energy. She wasn't angry. She was scared. She stood outside my apartment holding a thick folder and wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy. "I just want to talk," she said, her voice fragile. I let her in, made tea. She sat stiffly, like she didn't quite recognize the space I had built for myself. Then she handed me the folder. It was a breakdown of their finances. Mortgage late, credit cards maxed. Olivia officially dropped from her semester. And her husband had lost his job again. She looked at me like I was her last parachute. I closed the folder. "Do you want me to help you?" I asked. She nodded. "Just until we get back on our feet." I studied her face. The same one that used to scrunch up when I wiped her cheeks with a tissue before school. The same face that had laughed with her daughter when they made fun of my gift. I took a slow breath and said, "Then I need something first." She blinked. "What?" "A single sentence," I said. "Which one?" I met her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom. I took you for granted." Her lips parted. No words came out. It took 28 seconds. I counted. Finally, she whispered it. "I'm sorry, Mom. I took you for granted." It didn't fix everything, but it was the first real thing she had said to me in years. I nodded. "I'll help. Once. On paper. No more secrets. And not because I have to. Because I choose to." She left with a check. Not for everything, but enough to give her room to breathe. And that's all I wanted, for her to understand that love isn't measured by money. It's measured by choice. That night, I sat on my little couch and stared out the window. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad either. I was tired. But the good kind. The kind that comes after standing up for yourself. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't giving from guilt. I was giving from strength. I had thought, maybe foolishly, that things would shift after that conversation, that maybe the sentence, "I'm sorry, Mom. I took you for granted," meant something permanent, that it was a door cracked open toward mutual respect, toward something that resembled love. But if there's one thing life has taught me, it's this. People don't change when they're desperate. They perform error. Few weeks after I wrote that check, the silence returned. Not peace, just silence. Not appreciation, just absence. "No. How are you, Mom? No. We're okay now, thanks to you." Just nothing. They needed help. I gave it. And once the oxygen mask was back on, they walked away like I was the flight attendant they hoped wouldn't make eye contact again. And I understood, finally, that there would always be another emergency waiting to happen. That gratitude, for them, was just a moment between crises. One Thursday morning, I opened my mailbox to find a thick envelope from a private high school. Olivia was applying for early admission. There, listed among required financial documents, was a printed letter from my daughter. We planned to include Dorothy Reynolds as a sponsor and co-signer for tuition. She has supported Olivia's education previously and agreed to do so again for this transition. I hadn't agreed to anything. Not a call, not a question. Just an assumption. A signature that hadn't yet been forged, but was being counted on. I didn't call or I drove. 2 hours later, I was knocking at their door. The same house my money had held up for over a decade. My son-in-law opened it. His face dropped a fraction when he saw me. Not out of malice. Just surprise. "Dorothy," he said carefully, like stepping on thin ice. "Everything okay?" "No," I said. "And I didn't come for tea." My daughter appeared, in the hallway, still in her robe, coffee mug in hand. Mom. What a surprise. I saw the application, I said, holding up the envelope. You listed me as Olivia's sponsor. You used my name without asking. She blinked. We were going to talk to you about it. When? I asked. After she got in? After the first payment? She hesitated. It's just... we thought it was understood. There it was again. Understood. That word had been the silent contract chaining me to their expectations for years. Understood that I'd help. Understood that I'd pay. Understood that saying no would make me the villain. I looked her in the eye and said something I hadn't said to her in years. The answer is no. Her face fell, not in confusion, in fear. Mom, she said, softening her voice like it would undo the sharpness of her request. It's just school. This could really change Olivia's life. I didn't flinch. Then she can earn it. Her brows rose. You think we haven't tried? I tilted my head. No. I think you've tried me. She stepped back like I had slapped her. You're being cruel, she muttered. No, I replied calmly. I was being convenient. You just don't like the version of me that has boundaries. I left the envelope on the kitchen counter and walked out without another word. She didn't follow me, and for once I didn't look back. The messages came in later that evening, first from her. I really can't believe this, Mom. After everything we've been through. Then, Olivia, you're punishing me for something I didn't do. Then even my sister chimed in. Dot, maybe you're being too hard. It's just school. She's still a child. But she wasn't. She was 17. And if she was old enough to mock me in front of an entire room and still expect my money, then she was old enough to learn that life doesn't hand out scholarships based on guilt. That night, I sat in the dark and reread all the messages. They all had the same tone: disbelief, entitlement, disgust at being denied access. None of them said, "Are you okay?" None said, "We understand." None said, "We're sorry." And that's how I knew. Nothing had changed. I hadn't earned peace.